All right, good evening and welcome to the second public open house for the Broomfield Wayfinding Plan. Trunk, we go to the next slide, please. Next slide. This project is being brought to you by the City and County of Broomfield in collaboration with Tool Design and Apex Design. My name is Mark Ambrosi. I'm a senior transportation planner with Broomfield and project manager for this project. I'm joined tonight by Trung Vo, the project manager from Tool Design, and we'll be leading you through a presentation and activity if we have some folks show up, but thus far it's lightly attended, so we hope people are viewing on YouTube or checking this out on the website. Next slide, please. So our objectives for the meeting tonight, we have a number of them. We're going to begin by introducing the project, running through some of the project background, and discussing the process we have or the strategy we have for developing the Broomfield Wayfinding Plan. After that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Trung. Can you sneak back there? Thank you. And he's going to give a review of the public engagement that we've done so far and the input that we've received from the public. He's also going to discuss our approach for designing wayfinding signage, how we're going to be putting together a number of alternative sign designs, the process we're going through, and then the opportunities for the public to chime in on the signs that you like best. And in the meeting, depending on if we have anybody show up, we'll be going through a little exercise to solicit your input about some of the wayfinding design elements that are going to help us get to some of those design alternatives. And finally, we're just going to highlight some of the next steps that are going to be taking place after this meeting and through the winter. Next slide, please. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a little bit of the project purpose and background. And to start out, I want to circle back to the 2019 Bicycle and Pedestrian Assessment, where there was a recommendation for wayfinding and active transportation. So what this plan, or part of what this plan did, was step back and kind of look at Broomfield from a 30,000-foot view and identify routes and corridors that are comfortable and safe for people to walk and bike on that exist in the city today. And we're calling that the low stress network for active modes in the city. The assessment also identified the need for additional signage. So we have a pretty good network out there, as you can see in the image to the right here. But one of the missing pieces that this plan identified is signage so that people can actually use it to get where they need to go. So this plan is really going to be looking into developing that signage, understanding the destinations people want to get to, and basically developing and filling that gap that we have in Broomfield today so the low stress network is easier to use. And finally, the plan identified that our existing guidance for wayfinding signage in the city of Broomfield is minimal at this point. We have a little bit of guidance from the 2006 Open Space Master Plan, but that's basically it. And so we want to do this plan to help us identify standards and specifications for the signage, branding for the signage, where to deploy the signage, how to identify locations on the signage. So a number of different things that are going to help us get it out into the community and make sure that it's effective and branded in a way that everybody enjoys. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this project is really to develop a community-wide active transportation wayfinding system. And this is going to be comprised of signs and pavement markings. The deliverables and what that means is we're going to be coming up with a specific wayfinding branding for our signage. So it's going to have a unique Broomfield feel. It's also going to tie in nicely to the US 36 signage and some of the other signage you see in neighboring communities. It is going to develop a report that will include standards and specifications for what the signs are going to look like, how big they're going to be, where they get deployed, and different information that's going to help us maintain the signs and get them out into the community. And then finally, we're going to come up with some concept level plans for deploying the actual signage on a few of the routes in the community today on that low stress network. So once we wrap this project up, we can really hit the ground running and get some of that sign out to the community quickly. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about schedule and bring us up to where we are today, and then talk about some of the next steps. So this project began in the spring, and kind of through March, or from March to May, we kicked off the project and went through and identified some of the existing conditions out in the community. And so what we were doing was assessing the signage that's out there today. We do have some signage at trailheads and in open space, but it is lacking in other areas. But we also looked into what other communities and areas around Broomfield are doing with their wayfinding signage. So that's areas like US 36 Bikeway, which has its own standards out there today, and you'll probably be familiar with that. The next step, basically from May to August, so we've just wrapped it up, was some of the system planning. And so in this step, we went out to the public and the community and asked, what are the destinations that you are interested in getting to in Broomfield? We also evaluated some of our maps and identified some of these locations and possible destinations ourselves. So we came up with some kind of basic information about the places people want to go, and this is going to inform the information that goes on the signage. So August through the next month or so, we're going to be actually designing the wayfinding signs. So this is going to be coming up with a number of different alternatives, and then eventually getting to one preferred package for the wayfinding signage. And we're going to be running this by the public, reaching out to you to get your input about what you like best about the signage, what's going to work, what's not going to work, so we can make sure that it's embraced by the residents in Broomfield. In November through March of 2022, the team is going to be putting together implementation guidance and getting together that plan with the sign standards and specifications. And then March through kind of the early summer, we are going to be developing plan sets so we can actually go out into the field and deploy some of that signage. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Trung Vo to lead us through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for folks that are either joining us live or are watching a recording of this. I'm really glad that you're able to join us. So what I want to start with is by talking about all the public engagement that we've been doing. What a great summer to be able to interact with safely and socially distant, of course, in Broomfield, in asking residents and visitors and folks in Broomfield about what they want from wayfinding. This is a really quick checklist of everything that we've been doing this summer, starting all the way back in March and then kind of continuing through the summer. And then eventually it's going to primarily wrap up at the end of October or into November. This online open house is the second of two. So if you join us for the first one, then welcome back. And if this is your second one, or this is your first one, then welcome. You're not too late to join in the process. So then we're going to be presenting to the Open Space and Trails Advisory Committee later this month. And then we're actually going to be out there on the trails. And so we're developing these concepts, and we really want to get some sort of immediate, sort of instinctive gut reactions from folks that are on the trail. So you might see us out there potentially on a weekend in October sometime with some concept signs. So definitely let us know what you think about the signs. And there will likely be opportunities to provide people feedback online as well on the Broomfield Voice webpage. So in terms of just the numbers, we've got some really great statistics here. Excited about the number of people that have been visiting the Broomfield Voice webpage. That's broomfieldvoice.com/wayfinding. If you haven't had a chance to check out that page yet, all of the updates, all the project updates, all of the information is available there. So it's really the best way to get the latest and greatest information about the project. Earlier on in the summer, we had an online map up, and we collected input from you all about destinations, problem areas, things that we should be thinking about as we were working on the development of the wayfinding system, and then thinking about destinations that might actually end up on the signs. It then also had a number of folks complete paper surveys as well. So we've gotten to interact with hundreds of people in Broomfield, and it's been a really fun process and really meaningful. In general, kind of in summary, a lot of the feedback that we got was not surprising, right? There's sort of an expectation that the destination should on the sign should really be focused on the regional, the sort of the key destinations, parks and schools and trails, commercial areas, connecting to transit, libraries, places of worship. That's where people want to go. And so when we're thinking about destinations and which ones we include on the signs and how they're included on the signs, that's something that we're taking into account. The locations for where wayfinding should go, right? You can probably think of one or more locations in Broomfield that maybe you got lost at, or maybe you are getting lost at. So where the wayfinding signs will eventually go is really important for us to know so that we can plan ahead. And then finally, considering the routes. We only have a limited number of resources, both in funding and in effort and in time and space, really. So we have to start somewhere, and that's why we ask questions about the routes that are key priorities for folks in Broomfield. So that's probably a good segue into the next portion of this presentation. I want to tell you a little bit about the process to get where we're going. The first thing is to speak to corridors and destinations. So we've got input from the public about corridors and destinations. We're using that, pairing that with a bit of technical analysis, GIS data, considering the destinations that are out there that we know about, and then thinking about the corridors, especially connected to the 2019 Bicycle and Pedestrian Assessment, thinking about which corridors are going to be the ones that maybe we should be tackling first. So for those priority corridors, we're calling them priority corridors because we want to tackle them first, right? What do we do first to provide a connected network of signs of wayfinding that really help folks in Broomfield, visitors and residents, get around on Broomfield's low stress network? And so as Mark mentioned, that low stress network are streets and sidewalks and trails that provide a low stress connection for people walking and people bicycling. So that's really the intent of the priority corridors. Moving on to the fundamentals of wayfinding design, I'm going to start by talking about the functions, and then I'm going to talk about some of the principles. So to start on the function side of things, wayfinding is really trying to do four pretty distinct things. Number one, orientation is to let you know where you are in Broomfield, right? Giving you a sense of where you are in Broomfield, where you're going, the destinations that you can reach. Number two is to help you make decisions. So if you're trying to get to a destination and you come to an intersection, let's say maybe an intersection of trails, wayfinding should help you make a decision between going left or going right or going through to get where you're going. Number three is confirmation. Confirmation is basically breadcrumbs, right? Letting you know that, hey, if you're on the Lake Link Trail, for example, you're still on the Lake Link Trail, you're still good, continue to follow the path and you'll get where you're going. And then finally, recognition. So if we're going to be signing and directing people to destinations, how will folks know that they've gotten to their destinations? So that's those are the primary functions of wayfinding. In terms of the core principles behind designing and planning wayfinding, it's got to be simple, right? Let's say you're on a bicycle. You only have so much time to read that wayfinding sign, so it's got to be simple and easy to understand. Number two, wayfinding needs to be consistent. And what that means is that you need to be able to see a wayfinding sign from a distance and recognize that, oh, it's part of the wayfinding system. I know that I should be expecting some kind of information on that sign that's similar to other signs or other markings. Number three, wayfinding should be inclusive. And what I mean by that is that it should be easily understood by people of all ages and abilities and backgrounds, right? Of all diversity characteristics. And then number four, accessibility. Of course, it needs to be legible. It needs to be legible and understandable by folks that maybe have visual impairments, right? So it needs to follow ADA guidelines, the American Disabilities Act guidelines. So I want to show you some examples related to signage and then for markings. And so if you were at the first open house, you remember us talking about how there's a spectrum of wayfinding signage. On one side of the spectrum is maybe more conventional wayfinding. And then on the other side, it's maybe more flexible and maybe more custom. There's a trade-off with cost potentially with that. And so we're trying to manage what it means. Where do we land on the spectrum when it comes to being conventional versus being more flexible? Similarly, there is a diversity of markings that we could also leverage. And so we're going to be exploring developing concept designs for markings in addition to signage as well. I want to point your attention to existing wayfinding, which is going to inspire. Of course, it's got to, right? There's existing wayfinding out there, and we want to be able to integrate all the wayfinding, right? So it won't look exactly the same, but they will share certain characteristics so that folks kind of get this sort of wayfinding, the visual identity of wayfinding in Broomfield. And then on screen, you can see here on the right, of course, are some open space and trails wayfinding. And on the left are just some graphics showing the existing wayfinding signage along US 36, the US 36 bikeway. Moving into thinking about destinations. So we've talked about corridors. We've talked about some of the design fundamentals. We've talked about the spectrum of wayfinding signs and markings. And now we're the most recent effort that we've been in is thinking about how to select destinations. And the way that we do that is that, the reason why we do that is because we can't put 10 destinations on one sign because number one, the sign is not going to be simple. It's probably not going to be consistent because the height is going to change so much. And then it's really not going to be useful because especially if you're someone on a bike or if you're just someone walking and you don't have time to look at every single destination, we've got to prioritize those destinations. So the first step to doing that is to gather potential destinations. We already have our own understanding, but we also asked you all and the rest of the public for input on destinations that should go on the signs. Number two, we have to omit individual businesses. So we can refer just based on national guidance and standards, we can refer to shopping areas, but we can't put in a specific business name on the signs. So we end up omitting those. And then we categorize the destinations in terms of generally 3 or 4 different levels by their sort of regional or local significance. So level 1 ends up being like cities and towns like Westminster or regional destinations like transit, right? Level 2 ends up being districts and neighborhoods, so kind of pockets of Broomfield. And then level 3 and 4, that primarily includes local landmarks and local destinations. And then it's sort of a case-by-case decision for every single sign to think about what makes the most sense to include on the sign assemblies. If we can only include 3 destinations, what are the most important ones? You can imagine, like, let's say maybe you're driving on a freeway, or maybe you're in an airport. You get wayfinding for major destinations from a distance, and then as you get closer to sort of those more local or micro destinations, then you get some guidance at that point. So you can kind of imagine in that way, there's a way to prioritize the destinations that still makes it feel really intuitive to be able to travel around by walking or biking. So what I'm going to do at this point, it looks like we do have a few participants in the room. Thank you for joining us. What I would love to do actually at this point, and just kind of knowing that this actually may be more useful for you to go through in your own time. So what I'm going to do with these next couple slides here is sort of walk you through this visual preference survey. The intent of the visual preference survey, let me actually go back because I don't want to distract you with these shares. The intent of the visual preference survey is to just get a sense from you as someone who lives in or works in or travels in Broomfield. What is your preference for certain things that are eventually going to somehow relate to what the wayfinding signage and markings might be? So you're not choosing in the survey. You're not choosing specific patterns or colors. It's really more about your gut sense and what is eventually going to inform and kind of inspire what the real concepts end up being. So take that in mind. We're kind of one step back from the wayfinding design. This is really just intended to capture your sort of initial gut reactions to some of these options on screen. So what I would encourage you to do right after this is to go to broomfieldvoice.com/wayfinding and then take the visual preference survey. There's an online survey. That's going to be the best way for you to get your input to us. And then what I would love for each of you to do is to share it with one person, a friend, a family member, a coworker. It would be great to get a lot of input on this. So for the next couple of slides, I'll just kind of orient you to the survey, and then you can take it on your own time. So one of the first questions is to ask you to pick two. Well, actually, all of them are pick two. Pick your top two. What two chair types? I know it seems kind of out there, but what two chair types resonate with your vision or your expectation for wayfinding in Broomfield? So in the survey, we're asking you to pick two. Just go with your gut. Think about what you think about when you think about Broomfield and what Broomfield represents and what it feels like. So the first question is about chair types. The second question is about patterns. Pick the top two patterns that resonate the most with you when you think about wayfinding in Broomfield. So there's 8 options here. Just pick your top two, go with your gut. Then we'll ask about color palettes in the visual preference survey. Pick your top two. Again, if you're thinking for more than 20 seconds about it, you're thinking too much, right? Just go with your gut and pick the two that resonate the most with you when you think about Broomfield and when you think about wayfinding, or what you hope wayfinding to be in Broomfield. Then we'll ask you for your visual preference for materials. So you'll see 8 materials on screen in the survey. Pick your top two again. And then we'll ask you about fonts and typefaces. Which top two resonate the most with you when you think about wayfinding or Broomfield, or wayfinding in Broomfield. And then finally, what we do in the survey is we ask you to pick your top 5. This is the last question of the survey. We ask you to pick your top 5 words that resonate the most with you when you think about Broomfield. And so there's a selection of words here. And then we also ask you about which words are not applicable at all for Broomfield or for wayfinding. So I hope you have some fun with the survey. It really shouldn't take more than a few minutes. I strongly encourage you to take the survey, hopefully right after this meeting, if not after this meeting soon. This will be open for the next couple of weeks, probably till the end of October. But we also encourage you to share the survey with at least one person. That would be a huge help for us. And this is the link to the Broomfield Voice page, which has all of the information about the project, but then also includes the link to that survey.
And Jerome, I'll also just add, I'm Mark Ambrosi, for those of you who just joined us. I'm staff at Broomfield and project manager for the Broomfield Wayfinding Plan. We will also be having the survey deployed at the library, Paul Durda Rec Center, BCC, at the city offices, and Health and Human Services. So they will be available there. Have your kids fill them out, have your friends' kids fill them out. They're fun, they're quick. We have about, I think, 30 responses so far from Broomfield days. And I think people had a pretty good time. And I've seen some previews of some sign designs built out of that. And the team has done a really nice job of incorporating the feedback that we have so far. So the more feedback we get, the better, I think, approximation of what you want we're going to have for the sign. So please fill those out and yeah, enjoy.
Thank you for mentioning that, Mark. So this is the last slide. We just want to promote some next steps, and then we can open it up for any questions that anyone has. And if you're watching a recording of this and you've got questions, go to broomfieldvoice.com/wayfinding. You can find a way to provide input in that way. So number one, we're asking you to tell your friends and family about the Wayfinding Plan. Promote that survey. It would be great to get that input. Promote the broomfieldvoice.com/wayfinding page. If someone's wondering what's going on with the Wayfinding Plan, they should go there. That's where they get the latest and greatest information. And then the final thing is to have you complete the visual preference survey. Only takes a few minutes. I think it's quite fun, and the input will certainly help us. So those are the next steps. So I would, Mark, is there anything else before we maybe open it up for any questions?
No, I think that's a good summary. I will point out that John from Broomfield Bikes did ask one question already about Will other languages in addition to English be on the signs, or is space too limited? And so I responded in the question and answer section that unfortunately, due to constraints with those physical sizes of signs and not wanting to cram too much information on them, the signs will likely be in English. We have not gotten to a final decision on that, but that's my assumption. With that said, we are exploring the utilization of QR codes, which are those little squares that are pretty ubiquitous around everywhere now. You can scan them with your phone, and that can allow us to do a number of different things. We could do some mapping. We could have translation of the exact signage. We could have some historical information. We have not landed exactly on what that's going to look like, but that is one of the options and one of the ways that we can make the signs more accessible to a broader spectrum of the community.
Yeah, thanks for that question, John. All right, what other questions are there? Feel free to raise your hand or submit a question through the Q&A function. We'd be glad to answer any questions at this point.
All right, we'll give that a minute for people to type in their questions. And yeah, if we're not seeing any in a few minutes here, we'll probably wrap things up. But thank you so much for Trung for the great presentation, and thanks to those of you who joined us this evening. See some familiar faces on there. See some new folks. One person is on the phone, so yeah, we appreciate you joining us this evening.
All right, well, if you're in bed tonight and a question comes up, go to broomfieldvoice.com/wayfinding and provide your feedback in that way. Take that visual preference survey. Really appreciate you tuning in live or watching a recording of this. Excited about this project and looking forward to continuing to hear from you and to advancing the implementation of Broomfield's Wayfinding Plan. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a good evening.
Take care.